It looks like it on my screen. It says custom line streaming. So, okay, I will call the meeting to order at 9:33. And in response to COVID, we are still continuing to hold our meetings electronically. The office is closed. However, members of the public are invited to participate in this meeting electronically by accessing the meeting through the YouTube channel, and that address is on our website. Just before we begin, I'd like to make a few comments on sort of the state of the nation, I guess it is. It's been a very interesting past 2 weeks since we last met. And like many residents in Middlesex Centre, I was horrified to learn about the events surrounding the senseless death of George Floyd in Minneapolis a few weeks ago. What's even more horrifying is that the circumstances of Mr. Floyd's death are not unique, and we're left with the sort of the heartbreaking knowledge that the patterns of behavior are repeated over again and over again, leaving too many families grieving for their loved ones. The reverberations of these incidents have been felt around the entire world. People everywhere are appalled and saddened and angered by what they've seen. More importantly, though, they're also united in calling for a change. As much as we don't want to hear that racism doesn't exist in Middlesex Centre, unfortunately, that isn't the case here and across our nation. We're not immune to the anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism and discrimination against people of color that we see around the world. I acknowledge my own privilege of, and that has meant that I haven't had to face life and of longstanding and outright discrimination and systematic racism that people of color and members of Indigenous communities experience in our country every day. It's the diversity of people, that is their history and their experience, that enriches our lives as Canadians. And the time is past due to make sure that people in our community are welcomed, treated with respect, and feel safe. We need to be tolerant of differences. We need to be thoughtful and kind. We need to ask questions, to learn, to build connections, to broaden our experiences and our understanding. We need to challenge ourselves to keep an open mind and to question assumptions, stereotypes, and labels. We need to expect people to behave and act in ways that show respect, and we need to act if we see racism, sexism, discrimination, or bigotry in any of its forms. As the Mayor of Middlesex Centre, I am committed to ensuring everyone in our community can feel safe and is able to thrive and to prosper. One of the ways we do that will be through our strategic plan, which is a key guiding document for our municipality, and we'll be working on that later this year with community members to develop a new strategic plan. Through this process, we hope to identify meaningful opportunities to incorporate the values of inclusion and diversity in the future plans of our municipality at Middlesex Centre. I'm one of those that strongly believes that we can do better and that we must do better and we will do better in addressing systemic racism. We all have a role to play in embracing our diversity and building a welcoming, inclusive community here in Middlesex Centre. So with that then, I will move to additions of the agenda, of which there are none, and ask for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Okay, seeing none of those, then we can move to section 4, delegations, presentations, and petitions. We're going to start with item 4.1, which is the consideration of the Lenders Municipal Drain, Branch A and B Engineers Report, presented by Brad Bunke from GM Blue Plan Engineering. And I don't see Brad, but if you'd like to take over and present your report. There you are. You're on mute, Brad.
There we go. Okay, good morning, everyone. Hopefully my audio and video is okay. If by any chance it hasn't through the process, please let me know. As mentioned, Brad Bunke with GM Blue Plan Engineering, and here this morning to talk about the Lenders Municipal Drain, specifically branches A and B. Looking at the agenda, I see there is a PDF copy of the engineer's report available, but considering the format we're looking at here, I've also added a few PowerPoint slides as visuals that maybe will help illustrate the story as we go through. So I'm going to periodically just share my screen. Hopefully I'm not jumping around too much, but I'm mostly going to walk through the report as I typically would with a regular council meeting, with a few visuals added, as I say, as well. So we'll do that as we go along, and of course, happy to take questions at the end with anything regarding the report. So to start off, just a little brief history with this. We, as GM Blue Plan, were appointed by the municipality Middlesex Centre to respond to a Section 4 petition. So that would be for a new municipal drain. We had 3 property owners sign the petition: Bear Creek Farms, Rain Direct specifically, Diane Charlton, and Dan Van Derden of Milgray Farms. So what I will do here, just for reference, I'm going to share my screen. And if I flip through, hopefully everyone can see an overall plan of the watershed come up. This is the area that we're speaking of for the lender's drain. You can see Charlton Drive, running east-west, and the black heavy line is the watershed in question that we're looking at. So when we began this process, we started with the old reports, of course, but realized there are 9 properties affected by this work, one of which is the municipality of Middlesex Centre in terms of Charlton Drive. In terms of a brief history of the lenders as it exists today, our understanding is the lender's main drain, which is a fairly large open ditch, 2 kilometers long on the left side of the page. That was constructed in 1973, and there were 4 branches that were constructed in association with that: A, B, C, and D. Those were as well constructed in 1973. The 2, as I mentioned, we're speaking of being A and B. Branch A is the largest, I believe, of the 4, and it's about 1.4 kilometers long, closed tile, 6-inch to 14-inch in size. And branch B is, I have 335 meters of 8-inch to 10-inch tile too as well. Okay. To start our process, and I'll leave the visuals up here too, because the next couple slides may illustrate this better than what I'm speaking of. We held an on-site meeting with the landowners in December of 2017. We've included some detailed comments in our report, but I'll paraphrase for the purpose of the presentation here. The primary comment we received is Bear Creek Farms and Rain Direct specifically has 35 acres of his property south of Charlton Drive, outside of the watershed, that he would like to drain. He's discussed this with Ken McCutcheon, and Ken did a survey and felt that if he was provided a proper outlet of sufficient size and depth, that rain would be able to drain that particular area. So I've highlighted in red here the area in question. This is the 35 acres that rain would like to drain to branch B. And through the process, I'll just point this to as well, we discovered that sometime after 1973, the original construction, there was a pretty significant area to the west of the watershed that had at some point in time additionally been drained to lenders branch B. So I say that because, of course, we would need to account for that in our sizing and our design too as well. So as I mentioned, Rain and Bear Creek specifically had the primary comments during our meeting. There wasn't much else. The attendance was a little bit light, so we spent the next few months doing our best to contact the landowners within the watershed to solicit their comments, any drainage concerns, any improvements they would like to make. We were successful for the most part. Some were not responsive, but anyone we did speak to had no drainage concerns specifically and no improvements necessarily to be made. So following that meeting, as per typical, we completed a topographic survey to understand the lay of the land, and we completed an initial design. One of the points I would like to make too as well is there's very light cover through the area. So the biggest design challenge that we had through this was finding a sufficient outlet and taking the drain to the lender's main drain too as well. So we actually talked to Rain through the process, and there were a number of different options discussed as to possible outlet locations. And the reason we settled on what we'll speak of a little bit later is this was the outlet that was both deemed sufficient, but also had proper cover for capacity of the pipe too as well. So after, as I say, some of these design considerations, we held another meeting, which we call our design review meeting with the landowners, obviously before anything goes to council. We held that in October of 2018 and discussed with the landowners in attendance our proposed design. Again, paraphrasing, but the largest concern coming out of that meeting was our lender's branch A outlet, which heads to, as circled in red here, to the lender's main drain. There is a tree line, a fairly significant windrow of coniferous trees, and the landowners were collectively concerned about the proximity of the drain to the tree line. So there was some discussion back and forth. We went away to look at other options outside of the tree line. And in the interim after that meeting, we also pursued the approval authorities, specifically the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and the Ausable Bayfield Conservation Authority. There's some environmental considerations with this project that I'll just touch on a little bit later. Finally, in October of 2019, we held a second design review meeting that brought into the design some of the considerations with the trees. In talking with the Van Derdens, who are Milligray farms on either side of the drain, and with Bear Creek Farms, it was decided after all the last 146 meters, I believe, of pipe would be directly on the property line and the trees would be removed. So there are, I believe by memory again, 26 trees that will come out. The reason for that is the landowners were collectively concerned about the cover potentially of the pipe if it was moved off the property line. There's a natural berm or knoll on the property line. So considering the equipment being used and some of the heavy machinery, everyone was in agreement that if we were to move to the property line, it would be the safest for the longevity of the pipe. So that was the final design consideration as we went through the process here as well. So in terms of when we had the layout and the general dynamic of the design, we looked at some of the sizing. We typically use, as I've mentioned before to council, a 38 millimeter or 1.5-inch drainage coefficient for design. We've utilized that here. And even without some of the additional areas outside of the watershed, Bear Creek Farm specifically, we found by modern standards that both branch A and branch B, even if they were in pristine condition, are undersized by today's standards. So we thought that was important to note. The other finding that we found from a Drainage Act perspective, I suppose, is that we did have sufficient signatures on the petition to have what's deemed a sufficient petition. And specifically in this case, we had over 60% of the land area identified on the petition as signature. We proceeded, as I say, with the design further at that point. And I just did want to note again and circle back to the environmental because it is fairly significant here. We understand the lender's main drain is a cold water trout habitat. It's a Class D drain by the DFO, which is essentially aquatic habitat present. And there was some lengthy conversation back and forth with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. In the end, our work as proposed and our design that was submitted to the approval agencies was deemed to have no negative impact on the aquatic habitat. However, DFO did inform us that we have a no in-water work window between October 1st and July 15th any year. So any work at our outlet, which is the lender's main drain, would have to be carried out sometime outside of that window. So I think that's important to note in terms of construction timing moving forward. In terms of the specifics of the design, this is a bit of a crude markup of what we are proposing, but we thought it'd at least again be a visual. Our design, and I'll go into the specifics in a second, but generally includes a new road crossing on Charlton Drive, an upgrade of branch B specifically in its entirety, and upgrading branch A from the confluence of branch B all the way to the outlet, the very upper end there of which outlets to the lender's main drain. Okay. And the specifics here, I've just summarized. Again, this is contained in the report in more detail, but this is just a quick list of what we're proposing. In all, I believe it's 842 meters of pipe to be part of this drain. Starting at the downstream extent, we have 146 meters of twinned 525 high-density polyethylene pipe. So that's our ribbed plastic pipe. Moving upstream from that, we have 365 meters of 675 diameter. And finally, a little over 300 meters of 400 millimeter diameter concrete field tile. There are some catch basins not mentioned here. There are a couple berms to also help erosion. And we are looking to abandon the existing outlet of the Lenders Municipal Drain Branch A. And if I back up, it's maybe hard to see, and I'm not sure if my mouse is necessarily showing up or not, but to the left of Branch A is the existing dashed blue line that is the outlet for Branch A. That just did not have sufficient cover through all our analysis. So talking to the Van Derdens, they would like that capped and abandoned too as well. Okay. Before I get into the construction costs, I might just stop the screen sharing here for a moment and I can just go through the remainder. That's the construction, as I say, and what we're proposing. Just some specifics about the working area. As per typical, we have a 20-meter working width through the properties. The watershed's about 100 hectares, a little bit over in terms of size. So modest, but certainly not insignificant in terms of some of the drains we see. We looked at allowances as part of our drain work too that comes into the report, specifically for any sort of crop damage, any right-of-way, which is a statutory easement for the drain that allows for construction of the drain and future maintenance. Those both came into play here. And the other somewhat unique allowance that we've allocated through this work is an allowance for the removal of those 26 coniferous trees I'd mentioned on the property line too. So we've worked that into our assessments in terms of allowances. The assessments themselves for the work, as per typical, we've used what we call a modified TOJM method, which looks at equivalent land areas and land size to estimate runoff and contribution to the drain sizing. We look at that in terms of benefit, which is tangible improvement to the land, as I often say, or outlet, which is contribution of water in some capacity to the drain that would contribute to the size. So we've worked that into our assessments and ultimately came up with a cost estimate. Again, much more detailed in the report, but this, everyone, sorry, I need to share screen here again. There we go. Okay. Sorry, for some reason that didn't work. Apologize, let me try again. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is a summary of the costs for the drain. The allowances I mentioned for crop damage, right-of-way, removal of the trees add up to about $14,600. The drain itself, being the pipes, a little over $120,000 in estimated works. The Charlton Drive crossing, which is the municipality of Middlesex Center under a Section 26 assessment, that's $12,700. Non-construction costs, a little over $50,000. And the total estimated cost, of course, this is before tendering, this is based on past similar projects, but we have an estimated cost a little under $200,000 for the work. Okay. I'll just leave the slides up because continuing on from there, as we always do as part of the report, we've created an assessment table. If we know the estimated cost of $198,000 and change, this is to appropriately allocate those costs to the landowners within the watershed. So as everyone can see, to the left-hand side of the page, we have our landowners' information in terms of lot concession number, the name of the owners. Moving to the right, we have affected area in the watershed and adjusted area. That adjusted area reflects the land use. A road, for instance, is hard surface, would theoretically contribute more runoff versus an equivalent area of, say, a farm field. So we've adjusted areas to account. This is part of that modified TOJM method I'd mentioned. Moving to the right, we have assessed benefit to a couple properties, Bear Creek specifically, and the two Milligray Farm properties where the drain is located. Most of everyone has an outlet assessment, i.e. they're contributing water to the drain. And moving further to the right, you can see the third last column being total assessments to the property owners. We in turn subtract the allowances as mentioned, and the far right-hand column is the net assessment to the landowners and the road authority, I should say. And that's before any sort of provincial grant. We put the, I think the superscript there, yes, says agricultural lands are entitled to apply for the 1/3 provincial grant. But just to be clear, as always, what's shown on this table does not include or account for that 1/3 provincial grant as well. At the conclusion of the project, I think as everyone is aware, one of our roles as the engineer is to assist the drainage superintendent in preparing an application for that grant. Okay, and perhaps the last thing I can show council here as well, this is Appendix B of the report, but to assist your drainage superintendent in any maintenance of this drain, we've assembled an assessment of future maintenance table. So this is based on percentages and would be a fictitious repair at some point in the future. So if there was a $100 cost, let's say, for a clean or a repair on the drain, very first entry Bear Creek Farms, as an example, would pay $31.20 for that $100 repair. So as I say, this isn't entirely valuable right now in terms of use, but will be in the future for the drainage superintendent. Okay. Yeah, the last two slides I had are literally excerpts of the drawings from the report. But that would probably be what I'd like to talk to today. I don't think there's any value really going through the specifications or some of the details. So I'd be happy to take any questions or comments from council.
Okay, thank you for that report, Brad. Originally I had noted there were no members of the public who wanted to speak, but I see there's a question from Terry Keep, and the question has to do with the 25 trees to be removed. And is there any intention to be replacing those?
It's an interesting point that we did discuss. One of the keys of this report that we've mentioned is that should maintenance be carried out in the future on the drain that requires tree removal, in the sense that the landowners would replant the trees, the cost to remove those trees are entirely attributable to the landowners. So we wanted to make that clear. Our advice with the report is not to replant the trees because they'd be directly over top of the drain. But if the landowner should do that and they need to be removed in the future to assist the function of the drain, the cost would be entirely borne by landowners again.
Okay. And can you see if there's a follow-up from the resident at all? I don't see that screen right now. Is it okay to move on? Do you see anyone?
There are no chats. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Silva had his hand up. If you'd like to ask your question.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mr. Bunke. I'd actually like to keep rolling with that question. Trees generally speaking, though I'm not a farmer, serve habitats, help prevent erosion, capture carbon, etc. Like they have multiple functions. So you don't even have a recommendation here, and I'm not, familiar enough with the Drainage Act to know what's possible. But like, is there a way to ensure that the property owners do replace the trees somewhere on their properties, even if it's? I understand not wanting to put it again right over the drain. That's obviously understandable, but nearby, within 10 or 20 meters, so that they're generally in the same area and hopefully serving the same function that they probably do now.
Yes, often what we find too is that through the approval agencies and the environmental, specifically the Conservation Authority, we often see compensation as part of the report. So if you were to remove a tree, for instance, there may be a 2-to-1, 3-to-1 ratio replacement. More often than not, we say somewhere within your property, not necessarily the same location. 2 points to consider here. First off, this is not identified in any way as a sensitive or even registered woodland, wetland. There's no environmentally sensitive features here. We also discussed this with the Asable Bayfield Conservation Authority. And again, they're the ones that will often ask us if there is compensation involved. They've informed us again, without the significant woodlot, significant wetland, there was no formal requirement to do so. So we don't have anything as part of the report or requirement for the landowner to replant them. There's no regulatory, and again, there's no environmental need from what we've heard from the Conservation Authority. Not to say the landowner can't do that. My understanding is through this area, and the Van Derdens could speak to this better, there are benefits of it being a bit of a windrow between the two properties. So there is thought to replant the trees again, but again, our recommendation is just not within the right of way for the drainage.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions from other councillors? All right, seeing none then, the motion before us is that the Council for the Municipality of Middlesex Centre receives the lender's municipal drain branch A and B report from Bad Bunkie of GM Blue Plan dated February 21st, 2020, and authorizes that the project proceed. Further, that the Court of Revision will meet on July 15th, 2020, and that Mayor DeVitt, Councillor Heffernan, and Councillor Arts be appointed to sit as the members of the Court of Revision with Mayor DeVitt in the chair. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Shipley and Councillor Silva. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, that motion is carried. Thank you kindly for the report, and I think the graphics added something to the presentation too, Brad, so I thank you for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Right. Have a good day, everyone.
Yep, see you next time. Moving to 4.2, this item is the consideration of the Pfister Jane consideration of report. Mike DeVos of Spreet Associates presenting. I've got noted no property owners affected by the drain have requested to speak to this, but that has been amended and we do have some residents who will want to comment. So, will we have a picture of Mike?
We will.
There you are.
Hello.
Good morning.
Well, I wasn't sure I was going to appear.
I beg your pardon?
I wasn't sure that I was going to appear. I couldn't see myself earlier, so that's good.
There you are, like magic.
Yeah.
Okay, if you'd like to take it away and give us your report, then we'll move ahead.
Okay, I'm going to share the screen so you can see the drawing. Okay, this report was prepared in accordance with Section 4 of the Drainage Act for a new municipal drain. There was a petition submitted by the Pfister property on the north side of 9 Mile Road to gain outlet in 3 different locations on the south part of their property up against 9 Mile. The natural lay of the land is southerly through the Dewan property into a private ditch system at the southerly end of the Dewan property into the Cross property in the south half of the concession. We did have an on-site meeting. We completed a field investigation, had subsequent meetings to review the proposed work and any alternatives to that. The outlets that are required will be tile drains, one in the southwest corner, one in the central area of the property, and one in the southeast corner. There are some existing drainage features in terms of tiles serving some of these areas that the Dewan property has constructed privately previous to this project. So we tried to work with the Dewan property to be able to try to utilize what was there where possible and accommodate any request from the Dewan property to not have to waste or affect things that were previously constructed. Unfortunately, when the Dewan property did construct the private drainage works, they did not take into consideration any additional capacity required by the Pfister property or some of the exterior properties that would have tributary area going through the Dewan property. There was an old award drain serving the east part of the watershed, and I'm just going to minimize, and that's this area right here. So it was partially replaced by the Dewan property, but the old award drain still exists through the Moyer property. So we will be looking at incorporating the existing piping and not doing any new work in that area, but replacing the old award drain as we go through the Moyer property. We have to cross 9 Mile Road 3 times, one on the east branch, one on the main drain, and one on the west branch. Once the east branch gets to the north side of the road, we'll head west over to the Pfister property to pick up that area that needs to be served there. It was the request of the Dewan property to stay in the middle area where there is no current drain. The natural or the larger area would be a little bit further east, although that has a private tile system that goes from the open ditch here up through the property to the north side of the road now. So we took that request and said that we could construct a drain straight north across the road and service both areas as one. Our original proposal had the drain heading west along the north side of 9 Mile Road over to where the catch basin is. At the review meeting and after the review meeting, it was decided to not construct that as part of the drain, but the landowner would construct that privately after the main drain is constructed by the municipality. So that will still happen, and the main drain will still service the largest portion of the area that's been petitioned. We would be looking at incorporating existing private tiling that the Dewan property has put in from the open ditch at the south end of the property. It heads west, then northwest close to the property line, and then heads northerly. It gets to a point where we would need to hook onto it because of its size, and then extend it further north and across the road to service the southwest part of the Pfister property. So there would be both incorporation and new construction on that. Our initial proposal, when we came back to the landowners, had a ditch clean out only for the open part, the open channel that's there now. And at that review meeting and after the review meeting, it was asked by the Dewan property that we look at enclosing the channel for the first half roughly on his property and putting a pipe beside the channel and enclosing that open channel into a waterway. So we have done that since that time. That did require a little bit additional depth and a small amount of additional distance downstream into the Crows farm than what we had initially. So as part of that, enclosure costs and the additional open work costs typically get assessed at a much larger percentage to the person asking for the enclosure. But the tile drains where there are no channels are assessed in a more normal fashion. The total watershed area is about 62 hectares. So it's not a large area. And the different components come in at different points. So we did review with the Conservation Authority, that's the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, as well as the DFO, the potential effects of enclosing that upper portion. And both agencies granted the approval to be able to do that. The Upper Thames had some negotiations with the landowner about providing some compensation with some tree plantings along the south side of the property, but that is something that is outside of this report and between the landowner and the Conservation Authority. Like I said, the part along the north side was dropped out of the proposal before the submission. So it's a little bit less costly than what we had initially. The total cost is just over $209,000, including the three road crossings. They will be required to be bored pipe. The municipality could choose to open cut that if they don't feel that the prices are sufficient to warrant that. But right now, because of the paved surface, we're looking at at doing borings in those locations. There has been some concern raised by the Dewan property with regard to the assessments. We did make some adjustments prior to submitting the report with regard to the assessments, but there was no indication of any concern with the allowances, more specifically the allowances for existing drains that have been constructed by the Dewan property. And in a recent submission now before this meeting, there was some concern raised in that regard. And I had talked to Dan, and we are suggesting to have a meeting with the affected parties to review those particular items, being the allowances and the assessments, to see if they can resolve their issues. If it is just strictly an assessment issue moving forward, that can be handled by the Court of Revision. If there needs to be further adjustments to the allowances, at that point, we could request to council to refer the report back for revision if that ends up being required. But I've only heard of this in the last couple of days, so I have not had a chance to talk to Mr. Dewan in that regard. But it is certainly, it doesn't preclude us from making changes at a later date if we don't need to, or if we actually need to. And if we don't need to, then the process can continue. So I would stop and open up for questions.
Thank you, Mike. Is Mr. Dewan on the line, Anne? I can't see everyone. You're muted.
He is, and we're just going to get him so that we can hear him speaking. 1 second.
Thank you. Lovely picture.
I'm not sure how well all this stuff works.
Mr. Dewan, I think you just need to mute your computer.
Is my picture on there?
No, your picture is not on there. But you just have to make sure that your computer volume is turned down.
Okay. I have some things to say about the proposal. First off, there's a part being the open ditch is going to be, the proposal is it's going to be put underground and enclosed. If that, and so far it seems like that's agreeable to everyone. If that's the case, I propose to bury the rest of it through my property, and I think I was told that Willie Krause is interested in burying the whole thing to 8 Mile Road, which would make maintenance and safety and accidental spills into an open ditch completely, that would alleviate all of that. So my proposal is, instead of going all the way through, or part way through my property and then building the coffer dam or whatever it's called, I propose that I'm allowed to put it underground for the rest of my property, and I'm pretty sure Willie wants to do the same thing to make it safer and from my area, then there's no need to reopen the ditch. So that has to be addressed in the proposal. The ditch was supposed to be deepened, but if we are able to bury the tile, then that part of the Fister drain proposal is unnecessary. Also, the coffer dam or the banking around where the tile comes from underground to above ground we don't need all that rock and I'm not sure what you call it on my property. So I would prefer that not on my property, because stones and farmers don't always get along. So other thing is the assessments I feel are unfair. I'm allowing the water and agreeable to let the water run through my place and help with that. But to make all the drains that I've bought and paid for municipal drains, and at the cost that is being allowed, seems unacceptable. For instance, the West Branch, I'm allowed $4,400 as an allowance, and the assessment for construction, it's charged $25,000. I find that completely, as far as I'm concerned, you're buying my drain and then charging me back at 5 times the rate that you paid for my drain for me to use it. So there's a bunch of things on the proposal that I don't agree with, and I'm hoping that we can meet and make arrangements. I don't want that drain made into a municipal, but I don't know the exact drainage laws, but I would prefer it be left as a private drain, and Carl Pfister and I can come to a mutual agreement on drainage works, and we can have a written agreement and cover all the aspects of cost and percentages. I would prefer to go that way. That's all I have to say right now.
Thank you, Mr. Dewan. I'll ask Mike to respond to your questions and clarify some of the process pieces.
Okay.
You're muted, Mike.
Okay, there we go. Okay, to refer to the stone at the end of the ditch that Pat is referring to, that's what we call a drop structure. The tile drains are considered low flow pipes, and they'll take a certain amount of water during rain events, but when the rain event becomes larger than what the pipe can handle, the remaining water flows over top of the ground, and when it gets to the ditch, that water has to drop vertically down 4 to 6 feet vertically down into a channel safely without eroding. And it's common that you will see areas at the end of ditches to have erosion from surface water dropping into the ditches. There is some erosion at the end of the ditch that's there now, and when we backfill the ditch upon the end of the enclosure there, we need to protect that water that's flowing on top of the ground and dropping down into the ditch. So at some point, you're going to need protection. It can be done in different ways. You can use a sloped stone drop structure type construction. You can also construct a blocked wall, which would be more vertical than the sloped stone. We did not have any concern or any request to do anything different than what was provided in the report, but that's something that I can review with the landowner in the subsequent meeting that we're suggesting that gets held. As far as the drain being private or municipal, it was discussed at the beginning of the project whether they could do this privately, and because there's 3 different road crossings and there's no legal outlet or no mechanism to address getting across roads and then finding a way to an outlet, it was the municipality's indication that they would want a municipal drain to secure a long-term outlet, a legal outlet for those road crossings. Again, we took the drain to a sufficient outlet, but if the landowners agree to have a private tile as an outlet, we could discuss that for the West Branch. I did not know that there was a concern with the amount of allowances that were provided. I can review that again with the parties and investigate that. Typically, if these concerns are raised, we try to investigate and then review with them. As mentioned earlier, as far as the process goes, if there are changes that need to be made or are being recommended to be made by us or the municipality, council does have the right to refer the report back at any point in time prior to the bylaw being instituted. So the council could choose to give this report first and second reading and then waiting until after the meeting that we have with the landowners to decide whether it should be referred back. You could also choose to refer it back at this point, but I think that might be premature because we don't know for sure that any changes, are definite coming from that meeting. Like I said, we knew of some assessment concerns that would be addressed through the quarter revision, but I did not know of some of these other concerns prior to the submission of the report.
Mr. Devon, is moving forward with the drainage superintendent and the engineer then to your liking?
I would prefer, before we go any further, to make the revisions and make it proper and all agreeable for the whole thing, and do it right the first time, and don't have to have 100 appeals and all that kind of thing. And the drop structure would still be required, as far as I can see, at 8 Mile Road at Willie Krause's southern side of his property. So I'm not saying that the drop structure is unacceptable. I'm just saying there's not much point of placing it in my place and then continuing on with the tile all the way to through Willie's place, through my place completely, and then continue south through Willie's place completely and fill in the ditch. Then the drop structure would be required at 8 Mile Road. That's it.
Okay, then. So do we need to amend the wording then that we have before us, or are you allowed to work through all of these other considerations with what we have in front of us?
The whole proposal is not, if I'm allowed to tile all the way and Willie's allowed to tile all the way to 8 Mile Road, then this proposal, in essence, is partially wrong.
No, that's why I'm clarifying, Mr. Dewan. I want to make sure that the motion before us is properly worded in order to address your concerns and allow the process to continue in the right phase of the Drainage Act. So, Anne, do we need to amend the wording? Just move it. Oh, you're muted.
Dan is on the line, Dan, our superintendent. Maybe he could speak. I don't know all the ins and outs of what they need to proceed, but I would imagine that they need to have a resolution to continue on in their discussions with the landowners. So, Dan, would you like to speak to this and see if we need to change the resolution or if we can go ahead with it as it is and changes can be made along the way?
Well, like Mike has noted, if the issues moving forward are solely with assessment, then we can go forward with the first and second reading of the bylaw and have a meeting before the quarter revisions to discuss assessments and deal with it through there. If Pat is now asking for a completely different design in closing down to 8 Mile, which I'm not even sure we can do. That's a large enclosure. The Conservation Authority would have to approve that. The DFO would have to approve that. But Mike can speak better to that if that's something that he thinks would be worth looking at. Then council would have to refer the report back to the engineer for an amendment. but I'll let Mike speak to whether
Yeah,
that design makes sense.
The enclosure, we did have discussions through the process with the conservation and the DFO. The Conservation Authority was quite reluctant to agree to having the enclosure extend all the way through the Dewan property due to the wood lot that would be on the east side of that channel as you run through the southerly part of the property. You know, so to extend it past the point that we've done might see some resistance. Whether it would get approved or not, I can't say. I can't speak for the Conservation Authority for sure. But to extend it all the way through the next farm is quite a distance, and typically you do see some concern raised from the agencies. The DFO in particular at that length might have a concern, but that's something that we would need to consult with those agencies again. I just caution Pat that the likelihood of being able to go that far, I don't think is that great from the previous discussions that were held. It's not that we can't try, but that would take some effort to be able to get through and find those answers. As far as what council's choices are, you could give it first and second reading, like I said, because at any point in time you could ask for it to be referred back if we find that we can make alterations, or we should make alterations either to construction or the allowances. The allowances are part of the report, they're not part of the assessments. So if we make alterations to the allowances, we would have to request that it be referred back. But it can be done at a later date if it's needed. You could choose to adjourn the consideration and reconvene at a later date, or refer it back and require that at a later date too. So there's really three choices you have.
Okay.
None of them would require the actual changing of the motion. If you adjourn, yes. If you postpone the completion of the meeting, but.
Okay, Councillor Shipley, you have a question.
Yes, through the mayor to Dan. Dan, if we were to defer this right now, could that include or look into the questions that Cross Farm had there? Would that be a possibility to do that at that time also, if we were to defer it?
Yes. I think the only issue may be the sufficiency of petition. Right now, the petition is signed by Carl Pfister. He is the area requiring drainage. I don't know if we extend an enclosure downstream through basically two properties, whether we still have a valid petition, but at that time we could have another landowner sign the petition and make it valid. But I think that would be part of Mike's scope to determine how much we need to make that petition valid at that point.
Thank you.
But yes, it could be addressed through referring the report back to the engineer.
Thank you.
So Dan, just
I have a comment. I have a comment. This is Pat Dewan speaking again. The way I envision this is for the engineering report to end, their involvement to end at the middle of my property, and myself and Willie Krause would continue on and do this kind of like a private drain as far as financing goes. We would take that ourselves to complete it without any more engineering, I guess you'd call it, because Mike has done all the engineering size-wise and height-wise well into Willie's place. So if we followed his recommendations for height, or I should say depth of the drain, then Willie and I would would take that upon ourselves without having to worry about Crosa, or not Crosa, but Pfister and Moyers and Patton. So this is a thing we would do by ourselves financially.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Mr. Dewan. I'm thinking, Dan, what I'm hearing you say is that, like, we're not going to decide this now, and I think we've heard the concerns and some of the options. What we need to do is allow people to move forward. It can be referred back to council if these conversations go nowhere or there are other insurmountable, say, conservation authority barriers and that kind of thing. Am I right in thinking that we should just let you and the engineering and Mr. Dewan and all the other people who are involved sit down, figure this out, and then we can defer or refer back or as needed in the future? Am I on the right page or not?
I think
Yes.
that would be best. Doing a private enclosure of a water course downstream from a municipal drain, I don't see being approved by the DFO or the Conservation Authority. He mentioned using Mike's pipe sizing at that outlet. Well, he can't just carry that down through another field because there's extra water being added to that pipe. The pipe may not be sufficient 200 meters down the drain where it is from the current outlet. So it would require engineering as well.
Yeah, so exactly. There are questions that we as council don't need to be involved in. You need to address these with the parties, get all the details figured out, and then we as council can nod and smile and move you forward or not at the next stage if needed.
Correct.
Okay, so then I'm just looking, I don't see anyone waving a hand. So we have a motion before us that we proceed, authorize moving ahead, and then subject to all the conversations that need to be had, of course, and that we will be meeting as a court of revision. Of course, that may not happen depending on what happens in the conversations and so forth. So is there a mover and a seconder for the motion that we have before us? Deputy Mayor Brennan and Councillor Silva, are there any opposed to that? Seeing none. I didn't read the motion, but basically it's the same as the previous one, that council receives the Pfister Drain report from Mr. DeVos of Street Associates dated May 11th, 2020, and that the authorization for the project is to proceed, and that the court of revision will happen on the 15th of July on 2020 with the same members of council present for that. Is that, I should have read that before, but that's still the wording of the motion. So there were none opposed, and then therefore that is carried. I appreciate your time, Mr. Dewan, coming on and making sure your concerns are heard, and Mike for your report. And
Okay, thank you.
okay, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is going to be our municipal auditor. I was just asked to remind the public, any individuals waiting for the public meetings, we still have one more presentation, and that will probably be about 15 minutes. So moving on to draft financial statements, our auditor, Christine Scrimmager, will be presenting the draft financials. I don't see, oh, there you are.
The same concerns that Mike had, that I was not coming on because I wasn't sure why the camera wasn't working, but it's all good now.
Good morning, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Would you like me to go through the statements in my normal manner?
Yes, if you don't mind, please present your report.
Okay, great. I'll go
Thank you.
through them. Please stop me if I'm not answering any questions that you have, or if I'm giving rise to further questions as I'm moving through this presentation. These are your audited, so they're draft financial statements as of today. We hope they get approved, which you are charged with governance under the Canadian auditing standards. So once the council has approved them, they will become final, and we will move forward with the FIR filing with the province of Ontario. First off, I'd like to start by thanking the director and her staff for all of their help through this audit process. As you can imagine, COVID-19 has presented its opportunities and problems in getting an audit finished. So I just want to thank her and her staff because it has gone very smoothly considering all of the roadblocks that can happen with COVID. So these are, I'll move forward to my page 1. I'm not sure how it shows in your present or in your agenda, but it is the auditor's opinion. This is a 2-page auditor's opinion that came into effect at the end of 2018. These are a clean audited opinion, so which means that I've audited to materiality of approximately $450,000. That doesn't mean I only look at transactions. Every transaction that flows through the municipality is eligible for selection that we statistically sample. So we sample through payroll, we sample through purchases, and we sample through various revenue sources to ensure that the statements are accurate. And I have no qualifications regarding that. And as I said, they're dated as of June 10th. Moving forward to the statement of financial position. So this is your balance sheet, and I'll review these at a high level, but if there's any specific questions that you have, please don't hesitate to ask me. We had a significantly higher cash balance at the end of 2019, but we need to net off that capital loan under liabilities. So that first line under liabilities of 13 million. So the net cash position at the end of 2018 was approximately 14 million. It's approximately 18 million at the end of 2019. And the majority of that increase will show up when we get to the note on the reserves balances. The reserves increased by approximately that same amount. So that's where it will show up, meaning we have that savings for future projects. You'll notice also taxes receivable. I know council is always concerned to make sure that taxes are collected on a timely basis, and that certainly is the case. We've got about a $400,000 decrease in taxes receivable, even though our tax levy went up significantly because of the new market values. Coming down to total financial assets of 38 million, and then we offset that with our liabilities coming down to the line that I always mention when I go through these presentations, and that's your net financial assets. So that's the amount you paid off all your long-term debt and all your other accounts payables, and then received in all your accounts receivable. That's the position that you would be in, and you can see it's had a significant increase this year. And again, the majority of that will show up in the reserve balance at the end of these, and when we get into the notes to the financial statement, specifically note 9. The other thing I always look at is your debt and your replacement of capital assets. So I'm looking to see that your capital assets are being replaced at least at amortized value. And you'll see, in fact, that your overall capital assets, which are the first 2 lines under non-financial assets, have increased by about $7 million. So that's $7 million in excess of your $6 million of amortization. So really, we bought 13 million of new assets and amortized approximately 6 million. So we're continuing to reinvest in our capital assets. We did not take out any new long-term debt, but we do still have that capital loan, which will be moved into long-term debt once those projects are completed, which hopefully will be 2020. So overall, an accumulated surplus of 238 million, which looks lovely, and you think that, but at the end of the day, 229 million of that is in capital assets, so the remaining is in reserves. Any questions on that at all?
Don't see any, Christine. Oh, sorry, Councillor Heffernan. Debbie, you're muted.
Okay, there I am. Through the mayor to Christine or Tiffany, the capital loan for 13 million, and I know it's been said it's for 5 projects. Do we know what those 5 projects are?
Yep, Christine, I can answer that. So through the mayor to Debbie. So specifically those 5 projects were the Hyde Park Reconstruction Project, the Martin Road Reconstruction Project, the Ilderton Wastewater Treatment Facility Expansion Phase 1, the Kilworth West Sanitary Sewer Connection, and a Water Supply Interconnection Project.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And again, just to follow up to that, when we do make them long-term debt, the majority of those will be repaid through user charges and not the tax rate.
It looks like you're good to go ahead, Christine.
Okay, great, thank you. I did want to also comment, you will notice that the deferred revenue, that obligatory reserve fund is in a negative balance. So just make sure council understands that we have borrowed against future development charges in order to put the required assets in place to allow for that development. That is allowed under the DC Act, so that isn't something that you're offside on. It does look a little strange on your financial statements, but there are several other municipalities that are in this same position. We did a search on quite a few, and that your consultant that did the DC study provided us with, and that is the case. In order to have development, you've got to build the necessary infrastructure, and in order to do that, we borrow against the DCs. And then when the DCs come in, once we start selling all those lots, then we replace those DCs. Just wanted to make that clear. All right, the next statement is your statement of operations and accumulated surplus. So I'll remind council, because as you remember, the budget column is under your cash flow. So when we go to buy a capital asset, we budget for that capital asset in the year we purchase it. However, under PSAB, which these financial statements are prepared under, we would take that let's say it's a $2 million capital asset. It would be in your budgeted expenditures, but in your actuals, all that would show up is the actual amortization for a year on that asset. So if that's written off over 20 years, it would be $100,000 rather than the $2 million. So I'm going to try and explain the differences between budget and actual, just so council gets a comfort level as to where we're going with this. Under the revenue side, so total revenue is 32.7 million, budget at 31.9 million, and really the increase, a couple of different reasons. The one is the efficiency grant that we got, the province giving all the rural municipalities. And then we also had increased user charges in the water area, in building permits, and we got finally got the money in for dry recycling. So all those things added together for the user charges being over budget. The other revenue line, we expected to get a couple capital projects going in 2019 that didn't happen, and they were there was some donation revenue budgeted towards those projects, and so that's why the actual is significantly lower than the budget. It's not because we didn't earn the revenue, we just haven't done the projects yet in order to recognize that revenue. Then the expenditures is where it gets a little different. So these expenditures, so the budget column is your operating expenses. Your actual column has your operating expenses plus your amortization, which was 6 million, I'm rounding here, in 2019. So if you take the total expenditures of 22 million and you add it the 6 million, which is the amortization, which wasn't budgeted for, you'd see you'd end up with about 28 million, and that's you're just under that. And as you are all aware, you had about a $2 million operating surplus in the year. And so that's really where it comes from, is both those overages and revenue that I mentioned up above, and then the decreased actual expenditures versus budget. So that line below, that excess operating revenue, so what that is showing you is the amount of revenue you raise in operations that have covered all of your operating expenditures plus your amortization. And we're always looking for that to be a positive and going in the right direction. And you can see you're very consistent. It was 4.4 million at the end of 2018, 4.8 million at the end of 2019. So significantly over your amortization amount, but not excessively so, because if you remember, amortization is based on your historical cost. And again, assets being replaced today are much more expensive than what they would have been back when some of these assets were purchased and being amortized. Then all the revenue below that line is revenue that relates to specific capital projects. So things like development charges that we do recognize, federal gas tax that we recognize, and changes in employee benefits that we did do a new actuarial evaluation of post-retirement benefits as well, which we'll get into in a note, but it's about $52,000 that we did that this year. So offset by the WSIB. Coming down to a total excess of revenue over expenditures of about 13 million. But as I mentioned, a lot of our new capital was in excess of that. So really it's all gone towards capital pretty much. coming down to total accumulated surplus at the end of the year of that 238,000 that I mentioned on the balance sheet.
Are there any questions on this section for Christine? I don't see any.
Okay, great. The next statement is your statement of cash flows. I won't spend a lot of time here. This is really just the increases and decreases of the non-cash items on the balance sheet, and I've really highlighted the large ones. So I would like to, unless there's any specific questions there, I would like to continue on to the statement of net financial assets, which really is a snapshot of what's happened in your capital assets. And this is a really good summary. So you'll see we amortized 6.9 million, and then we had net 13 million of new assets. So again, replacing assets in excess significantly of what our amortization is in the year. Nothing, okay.
Moving forward.
Okay, we'll go on to the notes to the financial statements. So I won't spend a lot of time on specific notes, but I would like to go through a couple notes just to help council understand these financial statements. So note number 4 is on my page 10. I just wanted to comment that on top of the revenues that you see on these financial statements, your staff are also responsible for almost about, well, it's pretty close to $20 million of other revenue raised for the county and school boards that is all handled through the municipality and then transferred over to those entities. And then note number 7 over the next page just explains the negative DCs that we've talked about and shows the breakdown of those deferred revenue balances. So those deferred revenue, the reason that they're not shown with your other reserves is because they are specifically identified as what they can be spent on, and council cannot change that. So you cannot change what federal gas caps, it's legislated by another body. Note number 8 is your breakdown of long-term debt. Council requested some more details on the long-term debt, and I hope this provides that information for you. As you can see, note B has been changed, and I think it shows you very clearly that what comes out of your tax rate and then what comes out of user charges. So the majority of those user charges obviously would be your water, wastewater rates. So about twice as much of your debt comes from those areas. Continuing on to note number 9. So this is really your breakdown, and this is where I mentioned about the increase in the reserve funds. So you'll see at the end of 2018, your reserve funds were just under 20 million, and now they're over 25 million. And so that includes that $2 million transfer that you approved through the last council meeting of surplus of 2019. Note number 10 just describes that 13.3 million on the balance sheet of debt that will be converted into long-term debt once those projects are completed that Tiffany mentioned. Note number 12 is consistent. It's some commitments. You have your ownership of the Lake Huron primary water system, as well as your commitment with the OPP leasing contract. Note 13 does have a new addition to that development agreement, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I think it's self-explanatory, but we are still looking for backup for what the actual costs so that we can claim our HST, as well as have backup in our files for that. Note number 14. So we have benefits that we will have to pay in the future. An actuary has what they call present valued that into today's dollars. So you can see, keep that number in front of you to know that at some point you will have to pay those amounts out. And then the last page, we do have a new note on the COVID situation, which is required now by Canadian auditing standards. Obviously, significant facilities have been suspended at this point in time, and I know council and the staff are continuing to monitor the implications of all of this. At the back of the statements, there's 2 schedules. One breaks down the capital assets by components. And I'll just comment that approximately 70% of your assets are in infrastructure, so roads, water, wastewater, and storm sewers, which you would expect. And then the last schedule is required by PSAB, and it really just takes your financial statements and puts them in a format that matches the FIR that gets filed with the province. So it's by function. So all the revenues and expenses broken down by function.
Thank you, Christine. All the details there as usual. Is there anything anyone would like to query about the presentation? Councillor Heffernan.
Yes, through the mayor to Christine, I just wanted to say thank you for breaking that out on the long-term debt. I would still like to see what they're for, but I understand that that's probably the best we can do for public sector. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Is there anything else? Deputy Mayor Brennan.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, to Christine. Christine, is there anything that you see that is of a concern as far as our finances for the municipality goes? Is there anything that you have any concerns with?
I mean, the DCs aren't a concern. It's something to keep an eye on, definitely. I mean, we always want to make sure that we, and keeping up with the capital projects, I think getting the ones, capital projects completed and then moving forward to new projects once those are completed is always good principles. And I've talked to your director about that, and she's totally in agreement. The only other thing I would mention is, because of COVID, and I've talked to your director about this as well, and she's very conscientious about this, is just making sure the internal controls, because people are in different places and things are, basically systems are changing because we're trying to just cope with getting documents out the door and receiving in funds, just making sure those internal controls are still in place through 2020, even with COVID. So, and I know that she's monitoring that well, so.
So just to clarify, Christine, then when you look at our internal control system, I mean, given that we were in the middle of things, I mean, I suppose it would actually be more apparent next year if there were deficiencies in controls, obviously, but there's nothing there that raised a red flag for you?
No, we talked when we were on site for a day, as the mayor knows, I saw her, but we discussed it with the director, and she's totally on board. I mean, her training is in the same area, so she understands completely what an audit looks like. So there's no issues that I'm aware of at this point. We haven't tested it by any stretch of the imagination, but we certainly had discussions about it and have no concerns at this point.
Awesome, that's really good to know. Is there anything else? Seeing nothing, then thank you for that comprehensive report again, and thank you for being flexible. And I think this year must have been really difficult in terms of trying to schedule all of the audit work in a different way and still manage your tax clients too. So thank you for all of that, and hopefully next year will be more normal.
We hope so. Thank you. It was nice to see you all, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Bye. Just to clarify, should we be doing public? Did I see that we should move to public pieces now, Madam Clerk? Or can we continue through the agenda in the order in which it's presented?
Yes, after we do the resolution for Christine's presentation,
Yeah.
we should move forward to the public meeting.
The public meeting. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so the motion before us is that the 2019 draft financial statements are prepared by the municipality auditor, as prepared, pardon me, by the auditor, Scrimgeour and Company, be approved. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Brennan and Councillor Scott. Anyone opposed? All right, that is carried. Thank you. So the first public piece would be, just let me get to the right page here. Could I have a motion that the Council for the Municipality of Middlesex Centre adjourn their meeting of Council to go into the Committee of Adjustment for the following application, PW Holdings 226 Union Ave? Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Silva and Councillor Scott. All in favor? That is carried, and I'll move that over to our chair, Councillor Silva.
Sorry, I've got hot corners and it just locked my laptop temporarily. Okay, Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to call this public meeting to order. If anyone wishes to receive notification regarding the minor variance or any other planning application being considered this morning, I ask that you please send an email to planning@middlesexcenter.on.ca and indicate in your email which application you would like to receive notice on. Also, please be advised that comments expressed and written material presented are a matter of public record for full disclosure. The procedure will be the same for each planning application, and the order of procedure shall be as follows. The chair, myself, I will explain the purpose and effect of the application. Next, the secretary treasurer / clerk, which is Ann Wright, she will provide any additional comments received from circulated agencies and the public that are not included in the planning report, if there are any. The planner will give an explanation of the application and present the staff report. Then the applicant or their agent has the opportunity to speak to the application. After that, then we'll turn to the public, and the public that have requested to participate in the meeting electronically will be asked for their comments. Public participants will be unmuted and able to speak when called on by the chair, myself. Please ensure that you state your name and your address so that your information can be reflected in the minutes. Speaking notes of those who have asked to participate have also already been provided to council for our information and consideration. The committee may then ask questions of the applicant or staff after the public has spoken, and then the chair will consider motions regarding the applications. Please note that there is a 20-day appeal period from today's date to allow for appeals against the Committee of Adjustments decision, and that if any members of the public or the applicant have any questions about the appeal process, you may contact the clerk, Ann Wright. So we have one item today for Committee of Adjustment. It is application A02-2020 from PW Holdings at 266 Union Avenue in Kamoka. The purpose and effect of the application for minor variance is to seek relief from the Middlesex Center Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 2005-005 as it relates to the minimum interior side yard setback required in the urban residential first density or UR1 zone. The applicant is requesting a minimum interior side yard setback of 1.4 meters on either side, whereas the zoning bylaw requires a minimum interior side yard setback of 1.5 meters on one side and 2.5 meters on the other side. The effect of the proposal is to facilitate the construction of a single detached dwelling. I see here no other comments have been received by the clerk that were not included. Has that changed in the last little bit, clerk?
I have not received any additional comments on this application.
Terrific. Mr. Fitzgerald, if you're on the line, we'd love to see your planning report, please.
Absolutely. So through the chair, thank you, and to all members of the Committee of Adjustment. My name is Dan Fitzgerald, planner with the Middlesex County. I'm just going to share my screen if I can and throw up the location map so that everyone has a reference with the application that we are referring to here. So as noted, this application before the committee today is with respect to a property located at 266 UNAV, which is requesting a minor variance for the purpose of establishing a new single detached dwelling on a vacant lot with a reduced interior side yard setback on either side. The subject property is approximately 627 meters squared, a residential lot with a frontage of 15 meters, and is located in the Kamoka-Kilwer settlement area on the west side of Union Ave. The lands are currently vacant and are part of a recently approved subdivision. The lands are bounded by an institutional use to the west, vacant land to the south, and institutional use to the east, and an existing residential subdivision to the north, primarily in the form of single detached dwellings. The lands are designated residential in the Middlesex Center official plan and zoned urban residential first density, which is the UR1 zone, in the Middlesex Center zoning bylaw. As mentioned, the purpose and effect of the application for the minor variance is to seek relief from the zoning bylaw as it relates to the minimum interior side yard setbacks required in the UR1 zone. The applicant is requesting a minimum interior side yard setback on either side of 1.4 meters, whereas the current zoning bylaw requires 1.5 meters on one side and 2.5 meters on the other. The effect of the proposal is to facilitate the construction of a new single detached dwelling. As noted in the report, the applicant intends to build a 2-story single detached residential home on the lands with an interior side yard setback of 1.4 meters on either side. I did not receive any comments from the public during the consultation, and no agencies had submitted any objections to the application. Staff do note that the intent of the application is to construct a residential home, which is consistent with the official planned residential designation. Also, the intention of the interior side yard setback requirement in the zoning bylaw is to provide spatial separation as well as access to the rear of the property. Staff believe that the proposed reduction would not adversely impact the spatial separation and access intent included in the zoning bylaw. Also, in review of the larger neighborhood, it is noted that the existing zoning in close proximity to these lands permits interior side yard setbacks of up to 1.2 meters. As such, staff are of the opinion that the format of the development is desirable for the neighborhood. As noted in the report, staff is of the opinion that the interior side yard reductions are considered minor in nature and can be considered appropriate development for the subject lands, as the location of the proposed residential dwelling is not anticipated to cause an adverse impact on the surrounding uses. Therefore, staff are of the opinion that the proposal satisfies the Planning Act test and recommends that the subject application be approved. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks so much. Moving on, Mr. Keep, pretty sure you're on. You asked a question earlier. Actually, hang on. Yes. Would you like to add anything to the planner's report?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the council regarding this. It's really just what I would add would just that the intention is not to just build a house. The intention is to build a net zero house, which is a house that generates as much energy as it uses. And part of the beauty of living in our area is that council and the community in general seem to be embracing this future forward-looking technology and building. And to be honest, it's been really frustrating as a homeowner to try to buy a home that is a net zero home. And it seems like right here in our backyard, because I still live in Kamoka Kilworth in an existing home, that this is an opportunity to build a home right around the corner. It's really difficult to balance the economics of building a home and its value on lots that are obviously getting smaller and smaller. So that's why there's the request for the relief from it. But ultimately, the positive side of it is that I think that a net zero home, part of the rationale is to encourage the community to see the home during its as it's being built through entire phases. I started a Facebook page related to that, so I'll be inviting the community to see the home that's being built. I'm hoping I'll see some more trades, more builders show more interest, but ultimately there's a little bit of a philanthropic part of the application that can't really be addressed in just a minor variance. But thank you for the opportunity to speak to the council.
Sure, no problem. We don't have any public members who request to participate. We've noted that a couple times. So committee, does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? Councillor Shipley.
Thank you, committee member. Just to Dan, question, Dan. So if they decide to develop, which they will, the next lots either side, come back with the same proposal or less than 1.4, does this have any effect on anything at all? Like we're going to get so close together with these houses?
Through the chair to Councillor Shipley, that's a good question. I think in general, a lot of the development that we're seeing nowadays coming forward, especially on smaller lots, is with reduced side yard setbacks. So standard development, I would say in the larger cities would be down to a 1.2 meter interior side yard setback on either side, and that's in keeping with building code requirements, obviously, for spatial separations and unprotected openings. So as long as we feel that we're still maintaining the intention of the zoning bylaw, which is creating that spatial separation, creating access to the backyard, still providing you know, a nice amenity area. I don't adversely see it being a huge impact to the neighborhood. These are all obviously new lots that were created as part of a newer subdivision. However, the zoning has been in place for quite a long period of time. Most of the lots in the subdivision to the north were rezoned as part of their subdivision process. So it's likely that in this case, the developer just didn't decide to rezone these lands to include for reduced interior side yard setbacks. However, given the amount of inquiries that we've had with these particular lots, I would say it's going to be more common practice that most likely you're going to see more applications coming forward with asking for the similar request as this.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, then we have a motion here that the minor variance application A02-2020 filed by Terrence Keep on behalf of PW Holdings for relief from the comprehensive zoning bylaw in order to establish an interior side yard setback of 1.4 meters on either side, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum interior side yard setback of 1.5 meters on one side and 2.5 on the other side for a property known municipally as 266 Union Avenue be granted, and that the reasons listed below for granting the minor variance are all here. Basically, standard, we see these all the time. It complies with the official plan, our official plan, the county's official plan. It's minor in nature, and it's appropriate development. Do I have a mover for that motion? Mayor DeVete, seconder, Councillor Scott. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that's approved. So there's still that 20-day appeal period in case somebody changes their mind. But Mr. Keep, you can keep working with our staff and move forward besides that.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Could I also now get a motion to rise out of committee and go into public meeting? Councillor Heffernan and Councillor, we'll go this one to Deputy Mayor Brennan. Anyone opposed? None. Terrific. And we're moving on. Back to you, Mayor. You're muted. Your turn.
There we go. Okay, sorry about that. I'm just saying that we have 3 applications before us today, and before we get started, I'm going to review the public meeting procedures for planning applications. They're very similar. The chair and myself will explain the purpose and effect of each of the applications. Our clerk will provide any additional comments received by circulated agencies and the public not included in the report, if any. The planner will give an explanation of the application and present the report. The applicant and/or their agent will have an opportunity to speak to the application. Any public that have requested to participate in the meeting electronically will be asked for their comments. Public participants will be unmuted and able to speak when called on by the chair. Please ensure you state your name and address so that your information can be reflected in the minutes. Speaking notes of those who have asked to participate have already provided to council for their information and consideration. At that point, then council may ask questions of the applicant and or staff, and then I will consider motions regarding the application. As previously, please note there is a 20-day appeal period from the date of the notice of decision to allow for appeals against the council's decision, and that if any members of the public or the applicant have any questions about that process, they may contact our clerk and write. If you wish to receive further notification of the applications being heard today, I ask that you please send an email to planning@middlesexcenter.on.ca requesting further notification. Please provide your name and mailing address, including postal code. Also, please be advised that comments expressed and written material presented are a matter of public record for full disclosure. So the first item we have is zoning bylaw amendment number 8, Kilworth Business Park Incorporated. We have an agent, Jared Dykstra, who will be presenting it. The address of this application is 22499 Jeffries Road. The purpose and effect of the zoning bylaw amendment application adds pharmacy as permitted use to the current highway commercial exception 11C2-11 zone, in addition to other commercial uses currently permitted within the highway commercial exception number 11C2-11 zone. Additional comments were received by the clerk, and we got those by mail, and these were not included in the report. I think everyone's read those then. So if we can move to our planner, Ms. Cabral is going to give this report. There you are.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'll just share my screen to pull up a location map. And hopefully everyone can see that now. Okay, so as mentioned, this application is to add pharmacy to a list of permitted uses within the site-specific commercial zone that is currently on the property at 22499 Jeffries. This location of the property is at Glendon Drive and Jeffries in Kilworth. There are currently 2 existing buildings on the property and 1 future building per the site plan agreement from 2009 and was amended in 2016. I'd like to mention at this time that as a result of this zoning amendment, no new buildings are proposed beyond what's already approved, nor is it amending the existing agreement on the site. Simply, this amendment is proposing to add the pharmacy as a standalone use, since pharmacies are only permitted where they are incidental or accessory to a clinic, and a clinic is permitted on this site as a use, as well as retail stores and other commercial uses. So pharmacies are retail in nature, but they do differ from traditional retail stores. Specifically, they dispense prescription drugs and other personal healthcare products such as medical supplies or over-the-counter medication and some convenience items. With that, staff assess the proposed amendment against applicable policies of the official plan and determine that the use would be appropriate for the settlement commercial area and for this site in general, and would not undermine the commercial areas within village centers that do exist just west of this property in Komoka and Kilworth. Since the use will be within the existing or approved buildings, any design policies that address things like setbacks or screenings or landscaping have been addressed through the site plan agreement. And again, this agreement won't be amended as a result of this application. This application was also circulated internally to municipal staff and to the Conservation Authority, and they have no concerns with the proposed amendment. The county engineer also reviewed this application, and they have no concerns, but did want to reiterate that no accesses will be granted off of Glendon Drive, so the municipality would need to maintain the current entrances from Jeffries and from Doan to the rear of the property. So at the time of writing my report, I did not receive any comments or feedback from the public. However, as mentioned, we have received 1 comment from a resident who advised that they are not opposed to this amendment, but question why a separate building needs to be constructed in front of the existing buildings on the property, and if the pharmacy would be better suited for other commercial locations within the municipality. So for a part of this question, I'll actually defer to the applicant to provide a little bit more context about the site and the future development of the building A, which is the building that's in question. But as mentioned, this pharmacy, as well as other commercial uses, can be located within the existing buildings or within that future building. And we can certainly entertain pharmacy uses in other commercial areas throughout the municipality. We would just need to assess it on a site-specific basis, as it would require rezoning such as this one to permit it, or a pharmacy again can be located where it is associated with a clinic. So as a result of the aforementioned, a pharmacy use would be appropriate as an additional use on this site. As such, planning staff recommend that the application be approved.
Thank you for that report. We have listed Jared Dykstra from Silica Priamo, and I also, is Mr. Watmore going to be attending?
Unfortunately, the meeting went a little bit longer than expected, and Peter's not able to attend.
Okay, then we'll leave it to you to speak to the application.
Thank you, Mayor DeVette. My name's Jared Dykstra. I'm a senior planner with Zelinka Paramo. We are the agent for Kilworth Business Park, Inc., the owner of this property. I won't go over the application in much more detail. Ms. Cabral provided a good summary of what's before council today. Essentially, what we're requesting is for a standalone pharmacy use on this property. Currently, pharmacies are only permitted if they're associated with a clinic. The applicant is not proposing a clinic, just a pharmacy, so an amendment to the bylaw is required. No new changes or no additions to the site are proposed. I think the aerial that was presented might be a little bit out of date. There are 2 buildings currently on the property. There was an original building, and then I believe there was an amendment to the site plan agreement back in 2016, where an additional building was constructed from that. The proposal before you today is simply to permit a pharmacy in the existing buildings. There's no additional changes, no new buildings being proposed at this time. I know there is some additional land area to the north, but nothing's being proposed in that location at this time. In our view, the application before you is consistent with the provincial policy statements and conforms to the county and local official plans. And we're available to answer any questions that you might have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dykstra. I have that no public members have requested to participate, and I don't think there's any amendment to that. So I'll turn it over to council to ask any questions they have of any of the participants. Okay, seeing none, then we can consider the motion before us, which is that zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 08-2020 filed by Zelinka Paramo on behalf of Kilworth Business Park Incorporated to add pharmacy as a permitted use of the existing highway commercial exception zone be approved. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Silva and Councillor Heffernan, are there any opposed? Seeing none, that motion is carried, and you're off to create a pharmacy then. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
All righty. Moving on to the next item. This is number B08-2020, Tyler Perot and Melissa Cochran, 116 Delaware Street Central. The purpose and effect of this consent application is to create a new residential lot for the purpose of constructing one single detached dwelling. The severed lot is proposed to have a frontage of approximately 15 meters on Huron Ave and an area approximately 823 meters squared. The retained parcel is proposed to have a frontage of approximately 22 meters on Huron Ave with an area of approximately 1,200 square meters. Additional comments were received by the clerk, and these were distributed to councillors. They included correspondence from Mr. Hooper, Joanne Coita, and Derek Rain. This would be Mr. Fitzgerald. Dan, you are presenting this report, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and to all members of council. I'm just going to pull up the location map again. So that everyone can see the lot that we're referring to. So the application before council today, as noted, is with respect to 116 Delaware Street Central, which is a consent to sever application of an existing residential lot for the purposes of establishing a new residential home. The subject property is approximately 2,016 square meters or 0.49 acres, is a residential parcel and is located in the Kilworth settlement area on the northwest corner of Delaware Street Central and Huron Avenue, and is legally described as lots 11 and 12, Block K, Plan 76 in the municipality of Middlesex Center. The property currently contains a single detached dwelling, a detached garage and a shed, and is on full municipal services from Huron Avenue. The lands are designated residential in the local official plan and zoned urban residential first density exception, UR1-4 zone in the Middlesex Center zoning bylaw. The applicant is requesting consent to sever a lot with a frontage of approximately 15 meters or 49.2 feet on Huron Avenue and an area of approximately 822.75 meters squared or 8,856 square feet for the purpose of establishing a new single detached residence. Lands would have a frontage of, the retained lands would have a frontage, of approximately 21.73 meters or 71.3 feet on Huron Avenue, and an area of approximately 1,192 square meters or 12,831 square feet. The provincial policy statement, county official plan, and local official plan generally permit lot creation and promote infill and intensification to achieve growth objectives within existing settlement boundaries where appropriate. The subject lands are municipally serviced and abut an existing municipal road, meaning that an extension of services and roads would not be required. Additionally, the proposed lot is able to meet the zoning bylaw requirements of a 15-meter frontage and a minimum area requirement of 450 meters squared. This type of development is the preferred form as it promotes a more efficient use of land and infrastructure while reducing the need for an expansion of the settlement area boundaries. Given the above, planning staff are recommending that the subject application be approved. It should also be noticed that the notice of the application was circulated to agencies as well as property owners in accordance with Planning Act requirements. No concerns were received prior to writing this report. However, as the mayor had noted, we did receive 3 correspondence subsequently after the report was already submitted. And the following concerns are generally outlined in the letters, can be summarized as concerns about the lot size, existing grading or future grading as well, height, and overall non-compatibility with the existing neighborhood character, as well as issues experienced in the past with servicing and the impacts of construction on the existing neighborhood. With that said, staff are recommending the following: that consent application B08-2020 filed by Tyler Perot and Melissa Cochran in order to sever a residential lot with a frontage of approximately 15 meters or 49.2 feet on Huron Avenue and an area of approximately 822.75 meters squared, which is 8,856 square feet. And the retained is to have a frontage of approximately 21.73 meters or 71.3 feet on Huron Avenue with an area of 1,192.1 meters squared or 12,831.65 square feet on a property legally described as lots 11 and 12, Block K, Plan 76, in the municipality of Middlesex Center, municipally known as 116 Delaware Street Central, be granted. Also, consent B08-2020 are requested to be subject to the conditions as outlined in the planning report. There's a few conditions that I just wanted to outline to council here today. Most are standard, however, we did add condition number 10, 11, and 13 specifically. 10 being that the owner provide a lot grading plan for the severed land showing the proposed building envelope and the grading plan, which includes stormwater management controls to the satisfaction of the municipality. So the intention of doing that is to address concerns about grading on the lots expressed by the community. As well, the condition number 11, that the applicant be required to pay a fee of $9,636.88 for future road upgrade costs. So that's a condition from our engineering group, public works group. As well, condition number 13, that the owner demonstrate that once a legal survey is completed, that the lands do comply with the zoning bylaw. And further that, the reasons for granting the consent application B08-2020 include that the proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement, that the proposal conforms to the County of Middlesex official plan as well as the Middlesex Center official plan, and that the proposal complies with the Middlesex Center comprehensive zoning bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you for that report, Dan. Do we have the applicant? I have listed Melissa Cochran as speaking to us. There you are, Melissa. Would you like to speak to this application?
Sorry, Tyler's here too. And he's probably more prepared to speak than I am. He's the brains behind the operation. But we thought he was going to be at a doctor's appointment, but since this ran long, he's here now. So can I pass it over for him to talk?
Of course.
Thank you.
So my only questions would be in regards to the fee for the upgrades. There's been a lot of severing and construction on our street on Huron in the last couple of years, for sure. Is this something that is kind of been expected of everybody, or because of the issues that the previous severing had, is that why that extra fee for the upgrades would be required?
I'll pass that question to our Director of Public Works and Engineering. Rob, are you there?
Just have to promote him to a panelist. 1 second.
Thank you.
How about now? Okay. Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. That additional fee, that's been something that's been in place for certainly a few years now, and it wasn't, to my knowledge, is not a result of any particular issues, but just a collection of fees for future road upgrades. Given that the road access is already there, unlike a development situation of a new subdivision where the developer's paying for the full road reconstruction and all the servicing, that's kind of the offset here, right? So you don't have to go through that. So this is a fee for just for future upgrades.
Okay.
Okay, is there anything else you'd like to add?
So I do have one other question about the lot grading. It's the retained lot that I think has grading that is, I guess, different from the rest of the street, but the new parcel is the grading is pretty much on par with the rest of the street. Would there be any requirement to make changes to the existing or like the retained lot based on the grading plan that's been requested?
So I'll take that. So through Madam Mayor, no, typically we wouldn't request any changes on the existing lot. I'm not sure if there's specific issues that you can elaborate on.
I'm sorry. You cut out a little bit. I didn't know if that was directed at me or.
Yeah, I just wondered why I guess where that question's coming from. If there's issues on that existing lot that are a problem for the neighborhood.
Not that I'm aware of. I know that there is like a storm drain because the grading on the retained, like what would be the retained parcel, is a little bit different from the area. There's a storm drain to kind of compensate, I think is what it is for. But I don't know how that would affect the rest of the area or the street as a whole. Because like I say, the lot that's being severed, that is on grade with the rest of the street and doesn't really have an issue. So I don't know where that concern came from. I guess it was the community, but I don't completely understand why that was brought up.
Rob?
Yes, sorry. So I guess I'm not sure. So typically, yeah, we wouldn't require changes to the retained lot unless there was something that through the development of the new lot was going to have a negative impact and it had to be addressed somehow, right? So I'd say at this point, there'd be no expectation that there's any changes to the existing lot.
Just to be clear, the wording of the condition is that the owner provide a lot grading plan for the severed lands showing a proposed building envelope and that the grading plan includes storm water management controls to the satisfaction of the municipality.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes, and that would only pertain to the severed lot.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Is that everything then, Tyler?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. No public members have asked to participate. That hasn't changed then, has it? No. Okay. And councillors, I'll turn it to you. Do you have questions of anyone who's presented? We'll start with Councillor Silva.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. to the applicants, your neighbors, and I've seen it firsthand, have raised a variety of issues primarily around servicing, and a number of issues that lots, I think, further west of you have had regarding servicing, road being open for a long time. I understand that's, it's not strictly a planning issue, but I'm concerned about, letting this go forward now, and this takes potentially a couple of years to deal with all those same issues all over again. And to be honest, I'm not sure it's going to be worth it for you and worth it for the rest of the community to even allow that to happen. So there was, people's wells have gone dry because of servicing further west, and a variety of other issues. Are you concerned about that at all? Have you looked into that at all yet? That sort of thing.
So it is definitely a concern that we have researched. Luckily, I do actually work for a utilities company, and I've actually got to collaborate with a few professionals in the area and in the industry about the connections, the water and sewer connections specifically, I think, are the concern. And while it is more difficult for sure in the area, I don't foresee any problems getting the connections made and that sort of thing.
Rob,
Follow on, Councillor Silva?
Yeah, back to our staff, do you have any more insight into the issues experienced with the other properties further down the street, and whether the applicants today could also run into those same things?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So I'm not aware of the issues that were down the street. That would predate me, but I have reached out to staff, and we've looked up the as-built drawings to confirm the depths of sewers and water main in the area. So I don't have any issues with the connection of the water main or any concerns, because it's typically less than 2 meters deep. The challenges here will be the connection to the sanitary sewer. It's by far the deepest of the three, which is typical, but it's in the range of 7 meters deep. So we would anticipate that they will probably be into the groundwater level at that point, and so there'll be challenges with water flow while putting the service in, and will require either shoring or an extra large excavation to complete the work, right? So it will be more difficult than your standard 2.5 or 3 meter sanitary sewer. It's certainly not something that is insurmountable, but it will prevent some further challenges.
Okay.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, did you have a question? No? Oh. And Councillor Scott, you have a question.
Yes, through the mayor, maybe to the planner, Dan. I'm looking at the location there. I see that they're looking to sever the lot off, which is the red portion. And what is the space left over to the west, or sorry, to the west? Is this going to create 2 extra lots?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Scott. So the lands that I believe you're referring to, which are west of the red line, is an existing separate lot in that neighborhood. So that's a lot that had previously, I believe, been severed off.
Okay, that's perfect. That's what I was wondering, that if it was one big lot and they were separating another lot off there, which would create a third lot, but that's already been done.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
Are there other questions from councillors to the applicant, or none? Okay, Tyler, Tyler, you were first. Do you have a clarification or comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to build on what Rob said for Mr. Silva. So going to the sanitary sewer connection issue, it's my understanding, actually, after speaking to a couple of the companies that were dealing with the previous connections, that the reason for the difficulty previously was actually because they weren't prepared for the water table level. And I've actually worked on projects where we've had to deal with that issue specifically. So I'm, like I say, I'm, if they had known, if the previous companies had known about it beforehand, they could have, I think, prepared for it a little bit better. But it's my understanding that that's what actually created the issue, was that they weren't completely prepared for it. But like I say, I don't foresee any issues dealing with it myself.
Thank you. Councillor Silva had a question.
Yeah, well, so I guess the biggest concern I have is the fact that, as Rob said, potentially an extra large excavation here to hit that 7-meter mark, and as a result, other residents are already saying they have to actually pump more money into put in essentially new wells or deeper wells because of the work already done further down here on Ave. And I'm wondering, based on the sound, from what I'm hearing, that could be a possibility as well. You pump out so much water in order to get to that 7-meter point that now some of your neighbors again are going to have their wells might go dry, and they're going to have to invest more money again to redig wells. Is that a possibility? Because if so, like, I'm sorry, I get what you're trying to do here, and in principle it's fine, but it's sounding like there might be just too many issues to deal with based on previous history already on this street.
Well, with respect, I would say that the sanitary is the only real issue that is a larger hurdle than the average. And like I say, from seeing the previous connections and what they've done, part of the reason they needed to pump so much water out was because of the shoring that they did. They chose to attack the issue by digging a big enough hole, basically, whereas you can use other equipment like trench boxes and that sort of thing so that you don't have to make such a massive hole, and thus you don't need to pump out as much water, is my understanding.
But that's certainly not a guarantee.
It's certainly not a guarantee. But I mean, the other question is, like, if they had to dig new wells because of the last issue, is there any expectation that those wells, since they've already dug them, wouldn't already suffice for us redoing what has already been done a few times just down the road?
I don't know, and that's part of the issue here. So.
Yeah, Rob, do you want to speak to that water table business?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, Councillor Silva, can you elaborate? The wells that are in question, are they ones that are used just simply for lawn watering, or are they actually drinking water wells that are?
They're watering.
Okay,
lawn.
So. Sorry, I'm not sure if it's my internet, but you kind of cut out there, Councillor Silva.
They're for lawns as far as I can tell.
Okay. So if there is temporary dewatering done or completed for the construction of the sanitary sewer, it would be short term. I'm expecting it would be maybe 2 days. And so if there is a temporary drop in the groundwater level as a result, given what I know of the soils out there, it should only impact lots within close proximity, and it should be a short-term change. I think we all know that there's enough groundwater out there that the expectation that it will rebound quickly. I don't see long-term impacts from a couple of days of dewatering to do a sanitary connection.
I'd like to think so, but residents are saying otherwise. So that's my concern.
There are no other questions? Then I think that would be the end of the questioning session. Then we have covered everybody off. If the motion before us is that consent application B08-2020 filed by Tyler Pearl and Melissa Cochran in order to sever a residential lot on Huron Ave and a retained lot on Ontario in the municipality of Middlesex Center, known as 116 Delaware Street, be granted. There are 13 conditions, 3 of which have been addressed in detail by the planners. And further reasons for the granting of the consent would include that it's consistent with the provincial policy statement, it conforms to our official plan and to the County of Middlesex official plan. Is there a move? Oh, sorry, Dan's waving his hand.
Sorry, just to provide clarification, there was a mistake in the original resolution. It should say on Huron Avenue, not Ontario Street or Ontario
Oh,
Avenue.
so they both have a Huron address.
That's correct.
Okay, then, so it would be, well, we have the address listed. Oh, that's Delaware Street Central. Wait a minute, why is it known municipally as Delaware Street then with a Huron address?
Through the chair to Madam Mayor. So with respect to the zoning bylaw, the frontage will change. However, municipally addressed, it won't change.
I understand. Okay, thank you. So the corrected wording would be both on Huron Ave, both the severed and the other lot. Okay. And that is, we need to make that change in the document then, don't we? Okay, so as amended, is there a mover and a seconder for that motion? We have Councillor Scott and Deputy Mayor Brennan, and thank you. And are there any opposed? And that is carried, thank you. Moving on, okay, that's it then for this application. Thank you, Tyler and Melissa. And we can move now to item 9.3, B09 2020. The purpose and effect of this consent application is to create a new industrial lot from an existing lot to accommodate a sale of the lands. The severed lot is proposed to have a frontage of approximately 66.45 meters on Oxbow Drive within an area of approximately 0.826 acres. The retained parcel is proposed to have a frontage of about 50.33 meters on Kamoka Road and is approximately 0.683 acres. The clerk has indicated no additional comments have been received. And this again would be Dan's. Mr. Fitzgerald, you will be presenting the planning report. Mr. Roecliffe, it says, was not able to attend, but I see him waving at me, and maybe his agent, oh yes, the agent Barbara Rosser is here as well. And then two public members have requested to participate. We have Suzanne Vander Welden and Dave Vander Welden, and then we'll move to questions from staff and the applicant. So that's the purpose and effect. We'll move to, the clerk has no changes, none. So we'll give you the chair then, Dan. Where did you go? There you are. Would you like to present the report?
So thank you, Madam Mayor, through the chair, to all members of council. I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay. So as mentioned, this application before council today is with respect to 22747 Kamoka Road, which is a consent to sever an existing industrial lot for the purpose of creating a new industrial lot to accommodate the sale of the lands. The subject property is a 6,107.9 square meter or 1.5 acre industrial parcel that is located in the Kilworth settlement area on the southwest corner of Oxbow Drive and Kamoka Road, and is legally described as part of Lot 4, Concession 2, Geographic Township of Lobo, in the municipality of Middlesex Center, County of Middlesex. The property contains an existing single detached dwelling on a portion of the lands, as well as an accessory structure and an industrial building, and all are on full municipal services. The lands are surrounded by industrial zone lands to the southwest and residentially zoned lands to the northeast, primarily in the form of single detached dwellings. The lands are designated settlement employment in the Middlesex Center official plan and are zoned a site-specific general industrial exception M2-2 zone in the Middlesex Center zoning bylaw. The purpose and effect of the consent application would consider creating a new industrial lot by severing the existing industrial lot from the pre-existing residential use. The severed lot is proposed to have a frontage of approximately 66.45 meters or 218 feet on Oxbow Drive with an area of approximately 3,343.97 meters squared or 0.826 acres. As well, the retained parcel is proposed to have a frontage of approximately 50.33 meters or 165.12 feet on Kamoka Road, and an area of approximately 2,763.98 meters squared, or 0.68 of an acre. The provincial policy statement, county official plan, and local official plan generally permit lot creation and promote infill and intensification to achieve growth objectives within existing settlement boundaries where appropriate. Additionally, policies seek to promote economic development as well as competitiveness by providing a mix of range of employment uses and opportunities in more compact mixed-use forms compatible with existing employment uses. More specifically, Section 5.71.1, subsection C of the local official plan encourages providing opportunities for additional housing and employment while addressing urban land requirements for these uses in the municipality through the intensification of an existing development. As well, Section 5.7.5 also seeks to protect these lands specifically as a strategic employment area. The subject lands are municipally serviced and abut an existing municipal road, meaning an extension of services and roads would not be required to accommodate the severance. Additionally, the proposed lot is able to meet the minimum zoning bylaw requirements of the general industrial zone. This development is the preferred form and promotes a more efficient use of land as well as infrastructure while reducing the need for an expansion of settlement boundaries, while also protecting and promoting the viability of the employment lands. During the application circulation, staff noted that we did not receive any comments prior to writing the report. However, we do understand there was a few individuals that had wrote in to participate with the meeting as outlined. As well, no agents or staff agencies expressly had any concerns with regards to the application. Just to note that county engineer did review the application and noted that a dedication may be required along Kamoka Road as outlined in the conditions. So with that said, the staff recommend that consent application B09/2020 filed by Barbara Rosser on behalf of Ron Rowcliffe and Mr. Loger in order to sever an industrial lot with a proposed frontage of approximately 66.45 meters or 218.01 feet on Oxbow Drive with an area of approximately 3,343.97 meters squared or 0.826 acres. And the retained parcel have a frontage of approximately 50.33 meters or 165.12 feet on Kamoka Road with an area of approximately 2,763.98 meters squared or 0.683 of an acre on a property legally described as part of Lot 4, Concession 2, Geographic Township of Lobo in the municipality of Middlesex Center, County of Middlesex, be granted. And that consent B09/2020 be subject to the conditions as outlined in the planning report. Just as a point of clarification, I will address 3 conditions as well that were added specific to this. Condition number 7, which is the requirement of a development agreement. The staff in consultation with the applicant have added the words if required. So we're not certain that a development agreement would be required. In this case, it would only be required in such situation that servicing would have to be moved to separate lot to service lots separately. Staff did not have this information on hand at the time, so we're just noting that a development agreement may be required, but gives us the ability to not require one if it's not necessary. As well, conditions 13 and 14 have been added based on standard conditions of consent, and they are as follows. That zoning bylaw compliance is achieved regarding the existing structure and new property lines where may be required removal or successful receipt of a minor variance. So that's with specific requirements of the accessory building that will be located on the new lot, the severed lot, as well as condition 14, which states that the owner will be required to dedicate lands up to 13 meters from the center line of construction of of County Road 16, Kamoka Road to the County of Middlesex for the purposes of road widening if the road widening right-of-way is not already to that width. So further, the reasons for granting the consent application B09-2020 include that the proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement. The proposal conforms to the County of Middlesex official plan and Middlesex Center official plan, and that the proposal complies with the Middlesex Center comprehensive zoning bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you for that report. Next up then, I know Keenan Rowcliffe was there, and Ms. Rosser, there we are. One of you, or would the applicant like to speak to this?
Barb, I think you might be muted there. Were you trying to speak?
Yeah, she's trying to fix it. Barbara, your button is still on mute.
Bottom left corner.
There.
There you go.
I'm sorry
right.
about that.
That's all right.
It's all set up. Good morning, Your Worship and Council and staff. Yes, I'm Barbara Rosser, planning consultant through AGM relative to this application. And I've been assisting Mr. Loker, who's the owner, and Ron Rowcliffe, who is the agent. And as you've noted, I believe Keenan Rowcliffe is also signed in. I just note for council that the lands to the south, which are indicated as additional lands, are being purchased by Middlesex Paving and will be consolidated with the severed parcel. So they are currently under a different joint ownership, but they will be consolidated in ownership. And as a result, we do not believe there will be any building code issues resulting from the fact that the existing southerly property line does go through the building that's on partially on the severed parcel at the current time. We have reviewed the planner's report and concur with the recommendation. We understand the conditions and have had follow-up discussions with staff. We concur with the change in wording suggested with regard to condition 7 to include the words if required. And that's because we believe conditions 8 and 9 will not be necessary. We are aware that there is separate servicing already to the retained and severed parcel. And once that's demonstrated to staff, relocation will not be necessary according to the terms of a development agreement. So should the application be given provisional consent, we'll be moving promptly to move forward with final consent and hope to move this forward relatively quickly. We're certainly available to answer any questions from the public or from council or from staff. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Rowcliffe, did you want to add anything at all?
I think Barb spoke pretty fairly on our behalf. So just so you know, we're a family business. I'm Ron's son. And we're really glad, like I live 2 minutes from our office here. So we're really glad to be in the community. And of course, we're going to be wanting to cooperate with everyone on council. But yeah, I think Barb spoke quite accurately to our intentions and what we've been trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, the next, we have 2 public members who asked to participate. I don't see them yet.
We have one on the line. She's just joining us here.
Hi, this is Suzanne and Dave Vandervelden. We are good. We just wanted to hear everything. At this time, we have no comments.
Well, that was easy then.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. I'll ask then for questions from any councillors or staff for clarification, or there are none. I have one really little stupid question. Oxbow Drive is concession 3, is it not? That would be for the planners. The references here are concession 2, and I wondered about that. That just...
Let's look at that.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I believe concession 3 starts on the north side of Oxbow Drive, and then concession 2 would be on the south side, which is where the property is located.
Thank you. I always wondered where 1 and 2 were. Okay, very good. In that case, if no one has any questions at all, then we have a motion before us. The motion is that the consent application as filed by Ms. Rosser on behalf of the Brookla family in order to sever the industrial lot with the proposed frontage as described in Kamoka be granted, subject to all of the conditions that the planner reviewed already, and for the reasons that were also reviewed by our planner most thoroughly. Do I have a motion and do I have a mover and a seconder on this motion? We have Councillor Silva and Councillor Heffernan. Thank you very much. Any opposed to that? Very good. Seeing none, then that motion is carried, and good luck with your endeavors. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Council.
Thank you. Okay, so that takes care of our planning. We have to go back into regular session to find out where I am. There's a motion here to go into regular session somewhere. In any event, I'll ask for a motion to go into regular session. Councillor Silva, Councillor Shipley, any opposed? Seeing none, we need to go back to item 5, which is the adoption of the minutes for May 27th. Okay, do we have a mover? Councillor Heffernan, a seconder? Councillor Scott, any opposed? Fine, that is carried then. Moving to the consent agenda. We have 5 items here. Are there any that we need to pull or no? The motion before us is that the Council for the Municipality of Middlesex Centre receives the consent items 6.1 through 6.5 as information and approves the recommendations contained in the reports. Could I have a mover and seconder to table that, please? Councillor Silva. Councillor Shipley. Oh, Councillor Scott, we'll go with you this time. And so are there any questions on any of these before we call a vote? Clarification? Seeing none, then any opposed to these items? Seeing none, that is carried then. Next, we have staff reports. Section 7.1 is the development of a self-insurance retention policy. Could we table that? Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Silva and Councillor Heffernan. So does staff, where's staff? This is the CAO. Would the CAO like to speak to this at all? There you are.
Through the chair, good morning, members of council. Thank you for letting me speak to the report. This is something that staff have explored, and I've been working with our insurance carrier to look at our costs with respect to our insurance. And a proposal is put forward to give consideration to transitioning to a hybrid model, whereby we could look at processing claims in-house and using our deductible limit as our threshold amount, so that if there's any type of claims that come above and beyond, we would use our past practice or our traditional practice where we forward the claim and have our carrier deal with it. And if there's any types of claims that are under that amount, we could do our utmost to try and settle the matter without having the need to resort to the costs that are burdened by dealing with our carrier. And the end goal of this would then hopefully look at cost efficiencies and reducing our premium amounts year over year. So it's an exploratory policy that we'd like to try for the year, and then I can always report back to council after giving it a go. Our claims are generally low, but the majority are dealing with property or auto matters. And I think that it's something worth exploring to see how effective it can be.
Thank you for that report. Are there questions of the CAO? Councillor Shipley and then Councillor Heffernan. Go ahead, Councillor Shipley.
Through the mayor, the CAO, Michael, just a couple quick questions. One, will this create another job position or at some point? Are we looking at hiring somebody else? And number two, if we have to involve our solicitor in any of this, there is a cost to that also. So just your feelings on both those questions. Thanks.
Sure. Through the mayor to Councillor Shipley, the first question is no. We only receive a handful of claims per year, so it's something that I would work with our carrier on. And secondly, when it comes to any severe matters, we would send that to our legal counsel or to our carrier to represent the municipality. So I'm only wanting permission to deal with just the minor type of property damage claims without having to resort and having to have the whole file open through our carrier.
Okay, so then there'd be no solicitor involved in our end of it. We would pass it off back to our carrier then.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Heffernan?
Yeah, through the mayor to Michael, just a clarification. So for example, the item on 6.3, which was the budget to revenue and expenses, there was 3 items that were insurance that were under 50,000. So what would have been the process for those? Like, do they go to the carrier or is it just resolved within, because it's under the 50, so we would have to pay it anyway. How is that worked right now?
Sure. Through the mayor to Councillor Heffernan, it's a good question. Right now, any claims that are received into the municipal office, we track everything and then it's automatically forwarded. So we don't look at our initial claims that come into the municipality. So the intent of this report is to look at some of those claims that are deemed minor in nature, i.e., maybe it's an issue with an auto matter where we may have damaged someone. We know we've damaged someone's vehicle, or someone was on our property and drops glasses, reading glasses. I want to look at claims where we can deal with them in-house without the need to use our carrier to open up a file, have time and work spent investigating the file. So I want to try and offset that cost for the municipality.
So right now, if a claim was made, it automatically goes over to the insurance carrier. And then would he then send it back if it was under the limit?
Through the chair, no, that the premium is just the deductible amount. So regardless of the limit, it gets processed through our insurance carrier. So okay. I'm just using that as a benchmark because anything over and above, I want to feel secure that our carrier has our back and we would automatically forward. So anything related to loss in limb or something that's more severe in nature, it would automatically be forwarded as it is now. I'm just focusing more on of the issues that are deemed minor, that if I can offset the amount of claims that we need to forward off to our carrier, and that should then, our premium should then work in our favor and we should experience lower costs in the long run.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so we're going to vote that report, CO 2720, regarding the development of self-insurance retention policy be received, that the municipality established a self-insurance retention policy, and further that the policy attached be approved. Any opposed? Seeing none, that is carried then. Thank you. 7.2, fire budget amendment number 2, vehicle acquisition. We need to table this motion that the report regarding the 2020 budget amendment number 2 for a fire vehicle acquisition be received, that the budget is hereby amended in the amount of $47,756.78 in order to purchase a vehicle for use by the fire department and, for fire prevention, and further that the fire vehicle purchased in the amount I just mentioned is funded 100% from the Fire Vehicles and Equipment Reserve Fund. Table. Mover and seconder? Heffernan and Scott, councillors, mover and seconder. Discussion, questions? No questions? Oh, Deputy Mayor Brennan.
To you, Madam Mayor, to the fire chief. Is the cost of this vehicle split up between the 3 municipalities like Thames Center, North Middlesex, and us? Are they going to help pay for this vehicle because they're in the contract, or is that just all part of the contract?
Yeah, that's a good question. Through you, Mayor, to the Deputy Mayor. Yeah, that is a good question. And in our agreement, we have Thames Center and North Middlesex covering costs for mileage, and of course the FPO's wages when they are working for those municipalities. So yes, the answer is some of it is covered based on what they use.
Add on, Deputy Mayor? No, okay. I thought I saw a hand somewhere, just. Okay, so Councillor Arts and Councillor Silva.
You go first.
Go ahead, you're on.
Through your deputy mayor to Colin. I see the need for the vehicle, but I personally do not want us to buy a pickup truck. I'd rather see a smaller SUV. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, to Councillor Arts, absolutely. Based on mileage of some of the SUVs that I have reviewed in my research process, I do agree. An SUV is a number of them are being very strongly considered.
Thank you.
And Councillor Silva, you had your hand up as well.
Thanks. For posterity and just to beat a dead horse here, there was some consternation among some other councillors, and I think it's something worth reviewing as well about fuel usage, right? Fossil fuel usage. And so I'm just wondering if within the budget, if you'll try to entertain any hybrid or I don't think there are any electric models realistically that might suit the need, but at least some hybrid models of vehicles, as long as they meet the budget here, if you'll entertain those as well.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Silva, absolutely. In my initial research, I have not included any hybrid models, primarily due to the cost, the higher cost. Although I do see your point, and I can include those if council wishes.
If you can, I think it's worth giving it a try. Maybe you need to come back and ask for an extra $1,000 or $2,000, given potential long-term fuel reductions and the fact that we're billing out mileage anyway, it might make sense. So that's it for me.
Are there any other questions from other council members? Okay, seeing none, then shoot, where'd it go? We have a motion before us. I'll call a vote on it now. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, then that is carried. Moving to 7.3, which is the Public Works and Engineering FCM grant opportunity for municipal asset management program funding. Whereas the Federation of Canadian Municipalities through Local Authority Services offers a grant program to assist municipalities with municipal asset management, and whereas the municipality deems it expedient to partner with the county and other lower tier municipalities to apply for funding to progress the roads asset management program, therefore be resolved that the Council of Municipality Middlesex Centre directs staff to apply for a grant opportunity from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program to advance our roads asset management program. Vehicle-based automated data collection for roads and cart-based collection for sidewalks, road and sidewalk assessment data processing, pavement management software utilizing a GIS-based software analytics platform, and further that the municipality commit up to $15,000 from the 2020 capital budget for hot mix resurfacing towards the cost of this initiative. Do I have a mover and seconder to table this, please? Oh, Deputy Mayor Brennan and Councillor Silva, and there you are, all ready to go. Rob, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, please. Yeah, so recently there was an announcement through FCM that this grant opportunity was available for projects related to asset management. It's being administered through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, but it's funded by Infrastructure Canada. So the maximum grant amount is $50,000 for every municipality that qualifies, and there are some caveats to that. So at this point, we're requesting that staff be directed to prepare a grant application for the funding to undertake a pavement and sidewalk assessment to develop a database of the current conditions. So this assessment would be conducted using technology, including 3D cameras, optical devices, and GPS tracking that would all be mounted on either a road vehicle such as a van or a sidewalk unit for the sidewalk within the municipality. So we, Middlesex Center and other municipalities have been approached, I'm gonna say over the last 6 months by a company called StreetScan, and they were looking to show the municipalities the services that they offer through AMO, through their branch called LAS. And so LAS has gone through and selected, they did the procurement of StreetScan. And so we can opt to use their services without going through a tendering process because it's through the LAS system. So StreetScan, they've done work around the US and a number of municipalities now within Ontario as well. So they're certainly not new to this. I believe they've been doing this for over a decade, I think it was in their literature. So at the time we did not pursue their services because of the costs associated with it. And we had just recently taken on a road need study that was coming to a close. Since that time, with the establishment of this funding and discussions with the other lower tiers in the county, this is now looks like an attractive opportunity to proceed with it. Just to give it a little bit of context, our road needs study that was completed by Stantec, it came in well under budget. So certainly more than enough under budget to cover the costs associated with this, especially after the funding is taken into consideration. So the way the funding is set up is that you can receive up to 80% funding if it's for an individual application from a single municipality, up to a maximum of $50,000. However, if you collaborate with at least one other municipality, you become eligible for 90% funding of your project, still up to a maximum of $50,000. So we worked with StreetScan to get some initial pricing for all the lower tiers and the county, and with pooling our programs, they've offered a 15% reduction in fees, in addition to then what we're available to get through the grant, assuming that we're successful. So the table on page 3 kind of gives a sense of the impact of the collaboration and the funding as well. So if we did it as a standalone project with no funding and no collaboration, we'd be looking at a cost of about $57,000 for our roads only. And then by the time you go through the collaborative process and include the 90% funding, we're looking at a cost of about $4,800. So just below that, we went ahead and identified the cost of the road assessment, which wouldn't have got us up to the $50,000 in funding. So I've also added in a sidewalk assessment allowance and the inclusion of the image viewer. Software purchase is required regardless, and that would become an annual fee if we decide to proceed with the program. But even if we didn't continue to do updates every year, which would not be required, there would be an annual software fee that we'd have to look at down the road once we see the value in this. But certainly you can see for a net cost of $6,000, we get close to $60,000 worth of assessment essentially done by this company. And I think it's a great add-on to the road needs study that was completed. It was primarily completed by visual analysis, and although very useful, this will give us a hard analytical look through scanning, and we'll have it'll be very highly detailed, and we can pull up images, we can pull up data, so it'll give us a great baseline moving forward. So I would hope at this time that the council would support the application.
Thank you for that report, Rob. Are there questions on that content from anyone? Seeing none, I'll just add that that's an awesome initiative. I think that's really good news. So I'll call a vote. Is there anyone opposed to the motion as read before? Seeing none, it's carried and you're off to the mapping of the community. Okay, thanks, Rob. That's it for that section. We can now jump to correspondence. And we have 4 items. Are there any of these that anyone wishes to comment on or bring to our attention? Okay, seeing none, then the resolution before us is that the Council of the Municipality of Middlesex Centre receives the correspondence items 10.1 through 10.4 as information. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Scott and Councillor Shipley. Anybody opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. Deputy Mayor, would you like to do a County Council update?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The first part of County Council yesterday started off with a review of the survey for the strategic plan for the county, and there's a lot that the consultant went through, and we will be continuing to work on that next Tuesday, June the 16th. We're having a half-day session on the strategic plan for the county, so that's ongoing. At the County Council meeting, the one thing that we've been getting some emails from residents about gypsy moss. So the mayor brought up at County Council that topic, and it did get referred back to our forester, Mark Brown, to look into and come back to a report to County Council on the damage that these things do to trees and what can be done about it. So we'll get that report back probably in 2 weeks at the next County Council meeting. As you've seen in the paper and on the news last night, the paramedic report or the ambulance report from Chief Roberts was given to County Council. I won't go into a lot of detail because it was in the paper, but they did respond to over 68,000 calls last year, which is about 258 calls a day. They responded to about 116 heart attacks. I believe he said they delivered 20 babies last year. So 81.5% of the cost of the ambulance service is wages and benefits to staff. Last year, they saw a 14.6% increase in Code 4 calls. And those are the most serious calls, so there wasn't quite an increase in those type of calls last year. 86% of the calls that the ambulance respond to are within the city of London. So most of the biggest majority of the calls are in the city. Middlesex Center had approximately 1,690 calls for ambulance service last year in our municipality. Offload delays continued in 2019 to increase, but obviously with the pandemic, I think that number's gone down quite significantly in 2020, but we'll have to wait and see. One of the programs that they've been working on is Fit to Sit program, where the ambulance arrives at the hospital and a quick assessment confirms whether that patient can go into the emergency room and sit in a chair until they can be seen. And so that gets them off the ambulance a little quicker and gets that ambulance back out into the streets and responding to other calls. So that program is ongoing. They responded about 1,736,000 kilometers in calls last year, which is, as Chief Roberts said, about 4 trips to the moon and back. So it's quite extensive, the number of miles they do carry. Those are the main highlights of the ambulance report. In 2021, the insurance policy for the county is running about $761,000 a year, which is an increase of about 18%. A lot of that increase, some of that increase is for cyber hacking and all that, but a lot of it is the claims history and the low deductible that the county carries. So that is a significant cost. During the meeting, we got notification, and I'm sure everybody's aware that the child care centers have been given the okay to open up, which will create a whole new scenario on how to run those things. But they are doing it. The London and Middlesex Community Housing Report is going to be brought forward. The City of London is supposed to be coming to a meeting to report to us about what housing they're doing for people out in the county. We've heard they're doing a lot in the city, but we've asked them to come and report to us what they're doing out in the county for us and for our people out here, because it may be a little bit hidden, but it is out here in the county, and we need to address it. Those are the main highlights, Madam Mayor, and thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I am. Thank you for that report, Deputy Mayor. There's a lot to cover there today, and I noticed the timeliness of our change in insurance process, and part of the driver is exactly what we were talking about yesterday at the county. So I'm glad to hear we're doing it. So we'll see how that goes. We have under other business at the last meeting, there were some questions about the Lake Huron Water Board, and I had that meeting coming up for the board, and I thought I'd just report back really quickly on some of the highlights there. And I think there were some questions about surplus, but I'll just run through some of the questions that were asked, and if you want to ask anything, I'll see if I can answer those more specifically for you. So the kind of thing that was asked about with respect to the reports was on the hydro savings part, and so part of this purpose here is to educate you a little bit. The Lake Huron Water Board is not a metered service. They take part in like a commodities market and purchase hydro, bulk hydro and that kind of thing, and it's time of day costing, and that saves a lot of money in the long run because the prices vary hour by hour, and a lot of the use at the Lake Huron Water Board happens at night, which is when you can actually buy cheap electricity. So that was part of the reason that there were savings realized because of the pricing and actually when they were buying. There were also changes made in some of the pumps and the equipment usage. So that was another contributing factor in terms of why hydro was cheaper. And other savings that they saw over the course of the year related to labor and benefits, and now there are minor savings, COVID-related savings, but there's really, yeah, that's pretty standard stuff. There were a couple of vacancies as well that were mentioned, but those are all now filled, and so that really has no impact on the current costs going forward. The same kinds of questions that were being raised by members of the board as we heard Christine addressing. So the differences between PSAB, the timing differences between actual funding of certain things, and then that, because a lot of the work that happens at the board is construction related. They're working on pipes or reservoirs or massive structures. Some of those projects take 2 and 3 and 4 years. So it shows up in a budget, and then there are sort of works in process, and they're capitalized at a certain point, and then other things are still ongoing. So this shows up in the surplus and this doesn't. So some of those, like, it's not an asset until it's here, and those kinds of questions were asked about that. So there was clarification of those items and the timing of those and how they go through the system. There was also a report on COVID and how it's affecting our ability to provide safe and reliable water to our supplier, to our purchasers. And really a lot of the work that's done was easily shifted into a COVID world because supplies are dropped at certain spaces and people work at specific locations, and it's not like a big office environment where you have to make accommodation that way. So what they were focusing on were things like scheduling agreements and making sure that supplies that were critical, those would be in place, and the supply chains were maintained, that kind of thing. So those were preventative measures to make sure. They also worked very closely with the Ontario Clean Water Association. And so really, literally, a lot of their people were able to pick up their laptop wherever they were sitting and go home, if that made sense. So there wasn't a huge spike in stress in terms of, can we handle this? I think a lot of planning and time goes into making sure that water is available in all kinds of conditions, whether it's a huge snowstorm or I guess a terrorist attack or a cyber attack or anything like that. There are all kinds of double and triple safety processes in place to make sure that people are getting the water and that it's safe and reliable for them. A big item on the agenda too was the review of the master plan, and that happens once every 5 years. So the big news there was a lot of the impacts are a function of growth. So in terms of the service area and also the population as it increases within those areas. The report is really quite detailed, but it talks about every piece of the supply, so storage pieces and transmission and pipelines, all of those things. One of the things that they noted was that the Arva Reservoir was very low efficiency, and they're working on how to make sure that the capacity can be picked up in other places like the Springbank Reservoir. So gets pretty technical, but they're assessing that kind of thing regularly and then planning their capital expenditures to make sure that those needs in the master plan are, they're like us. They're looking forward in terms of where we're going to be with roads and subdivisions and what we're going to do with our pipes in the ground. So I think that kind of probably makes sense to you. We have meetings coming up in October and December, and it's that, oh, by the way, also that master water plan is that comprehensive document will be made available on their website. It's probably already there, but if you're interested, you can look at that. So the only other thing I wanted to focus on just for a minute was there were questions about the surplus, as I recall, but I don't remember who asked that. Was it Councillor Silva or, yeah? Did you have a specific question to ask, or did you just want me to run through the financial position? Because it's basically like ours. There's the financial assets, which relate to accounts receivable and cash kinds of things. Yeah. And then the liabilities, of course, any accrued bits that we have not paid yet or payables that are coming up. So that's the surplus, the net financial assets piece. But then the big part, of course, is capital assets, which are even bigger than our municipal ones. So now that Christine's run through that, maybe you're kind of nodding, but I don't know if I'm hitting what you need to know.
I was just curious if there was really something out of the ordinary, but it doesn't sound like there is.
No, and that like it is true that the accumulated surplus is $178 million, and that is made up of the tangible assets, which is about $140,000, and the reserves for the infrastructure renewal piece, which is the other 40, and that's described in the notes then to back up how it reconciles to the amount here. So that's a really quick overview. I'm happy to sit down or answer any more questions if people are reading this and interested in understanding more. I don't know what I don't know about this. I'm pretty kind of new to this, this whole business of providing water, but sometimes it seems really technical, and other times it just gets really interesting to try and learn it. So anytime you need to know, I'm happy to do that. So if there are no questions about that, the next item up is the bylaws. The motion before us is that bylaws 2020-48 and 49 be read a first and second time and provisionally accepted, and that 2020-44 through 47 and 2020-50 be approved, passed, and adopted. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Heffernan and Councillor Silva. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that the bylaws are carried then. There is no closed session, so the only thing remaining is the adjournment. That Council for Municipality Middlesex Centre adjourns June 10th, 2020 at, what is it, 12:26? And a mover and a seconder, Councillor Arts and Councillor Scott. Any opposed? And seeing none, that is carried. Thank you very much. And we'll we'll wait for Michael to give us that little news item for us. If we just sign off, then, I mean, we can stay on. We'll get our little news item.